Well, it's that time of year, it's exam review time. Okay, the first unit we're going to look at, or one of the first ones, is trigonometry. So what I've done here is I've given a list of all of the different skills that we should know. And the first thing that we're going to look at, it has to do with if you're given an angle, that you can find the ratio. And if you're given a ratio, you can find an angle of a triangle. Now, the reason I'm starting with this has to do with calculator work. That's all it is. So if we take a look at first, I have a graphing calculator up here. The first thing that I need to do is I need to make sure that any calculator, whether it's graphing or not, is set to degrees. So in the graphing calculator, I'm going to go to mode, and down here it says radians. I don't want radians, I want degrees. So I need to activate that by hitting enter. Okay, so that is done. And so now my calculator is set to do the work for me. So if I'm given an angle, I should be able to find a ratio. So remember, it's a ratio between specific sides. So for instance, if I have the tan of 35 degrees, tan is opposite over adjacent. So when I take my calculator, it actually will calculate the ratio between the opposite and the adjacent side of a triangle. So again, bring up my graphing calculator, and for it, I'm just doing tan of 35 equals. Notice it gives me a decimal. I want to keep 4 decimal places at all times. So decimal 7002. All right, so it's that simple. Now, the other thing that my calculator will do is if I have the ratio, so in this case, I would actually do a different one, but if I'm given the ratio of between two sides of a triangle, I can actually find the angle, and that's what's so cool about trigonometry, actually. So this time, let's choose cos theta equals, and this time I'm going to have the ratio part. Okay, so what I need to do here, it's a different function on the calculator in order to take a ratio and turn it into an angle. So in most cases, I have to do a shift or a second function. I'm doing cos ratio, decimal 4782. I can close the bracket if I want, enter. So it tells me it's approximately 61.4 degrees. So what we're going to do here is we're going to put theta equals 62 point, and if you notice, I have forgotten already, 61.4. And remember, it's degrees. All right, so that is pretty basic. You should have been doing that in grade 10, 11, and now in grade 12. The next thing, which again is review, has to do with SOHCAHTOA. Again, with SOHCAHTOA, it's something that you've used before. Important to notice that it's important that you have a right angle triangle. If you don't have a right angle triangle, you can't use SOHCAHTOA. Simple as that. And we can use it to find both the side length or angles. So let's take a look at the first triangle here. And for this one, we want to find a side length. So let's say we want to find X. And they've given me not two sides, but they've given me one side. And we're going to say this is 14. And they've also given me 30 degrees in the top. So how do I know whether I'm using sine, cos, or tan? Easy way, SOHCAHTOA. I'm going to label my sides as here is my theta. So directly across from that, it's going to be opposite. Hypotenuse, and that means this is adjacent. So you can see that what I have been given has been the adjacent side. So if I underline all the adjacents in SOHCAHTOA, and I want to find the hypotenuse. So you can see right away that the cos one is the one that has 2 underlined. Excuse me. Okay, so that's what I'm going to use. So this, remember, is my little formula. So I'm going to take this, and this means cos of a theta equals adjacent over hypotenuse. Fill in my information. Cos of 30 equals adjacent, which is 14, over the hypotenuse, which is x. So I'm going to cross multiply and divide. So when I do that, and you can see that I'm starting to run out of room, so I'm just going to group some of this and make it a little bit smaller for us to continue. So if I cross multiply and divide, I can see that I have here the 30 cos goes with the x, so I end up having x cos 30 equals 1 times 14, divide both sides by cos 30. So I end up with 14 divided by the cos of 30. Again, we take out our calculator and out comes our answer. So here comes our calculator again. I'm going to just clear that. So 14 divided by the cos of 30. Oops, 30. We can see it's approximately 16.3. And that is not a degree because that's the side length. Okay, now when we look at the next example, this one we're going to find an angle. So this time I want to find this theta, and I just named it theta there. And if I want to find theta, it means I have to know two other sides. Okay, so there's my two sides in this example. Again, I need to write down SOHCAHTOA. And I need to label my diagram. So directly across, so we have hypotenuse, across, opposite, so this means this is adjacent. So you can see I have adjacent and opposite. And you can see because two are underlined for tan, that's the one I'm going to use. So I have tan of a theta equals opposite over adjacent. So tan theta equals opposite, which is 10, adjacent, which is 14. Now this time, instead of cross multiplying, I'm going to actually take the 10 and divide it by 14. So again, let's bring up our calculator and we'll just put it over here for a second. So 10 divided by 14, so we're looking at, again, 4 decimal places, 0.71142, I believe it was. Again, I didn't look that closely. So shouldn't be 4.2, it should be 4.3, it rounds it up. Now that's not my angle, that's the ratio. So just like what we did at the very beginning of today's lesson, what we need to do is we need to go theta equals tan. You can use a little inverse sign, which is the little -1, decimal 7143 equals, and again, up comes our graphing calculator or calculator, and so I'm going to go second tan, and I'm going to go decimal 7143, enter. So approximately 35.5, and this time it is a degree. Okay. All right, the other item that we looked at was both the sine law and the cosine law. Now, both of these laws we can use when we don't have a right angle triangle, so they're quite actually important to us. Now, for instance, the sine law, you can see that it comes in two different forms. Now, it doesn't matter which form you use. Okay, you can use either form. Just remember that the side lengths are either on the top or the bottom, and the angle goes with the sine. Okay, it's just a matter of when you're doing this is you use it on non-right angle triangles. The other thing you need to know or can calculate, okay, so it's possible that you can calculate an angle and the side directly across from a given angle. So for instance, if I have this triangle here, as long as I know this angle or one of the angles and the side directly across from it, then I can use the sine law. And as I said too, or you can calculate it. So if I know these other two angles, that means I can obviously calculate the third angle. So I can use the sine law for that. The cosine law, again, comes in two different forms. The first form you use when you're finding a side. Okay, you substitute it in. And the second one is when you're finding an angle. Okay, so when you're putting these formulas on your help sheet, make sure that you indicate that one's for a side, one's for an angle. Now, you can use it when you know two sides and an included angle. So in other words, that Pac-Man kind of idea. So if I know this angle, I would have to know this side and this side in order to use the cosine law to find a side length. If I know all three sides, it means I can find an angle. Okay. The other thing that you really need to pay attention to is really watch your order of operations on both actually formulas, and in the sense that this item here is all together. Okay, so you might be better to calculate that all together. The other thing that we looked at too was obtuse angles. Now, an obtuse angle, if we're given the sine ratio, the angle could be acute or obtuse. So the problem really happens with the sine. It does not affect cosine or tangent ratios. And the important thing here is your lovely calculator will only calculate the acute angle for a sine. So it means that you have to then do something different there. So if we do a really quick example of what the problem is, the problem only happens if I'm finding an angle. And so say for instance, I have the sine theta equals 0.4736. Okay, because sine is positive ratio, whether I'm acute or obtuse, I don't know if this theta here is going to be acute or obtuse unless they tell me that piece of information. So when I actually find angle theta using my calculator, and up it comes again, when I go second sine decimal 4736, I end up with an acute angle, because that's what my calculator would give me, which is 28.3. Now that's acute, but as I said, the problem is with sine when we're talking about obtuse, or the possibility of obtuse. So I have another angle, we can call it angle 2 if you would like, and the way I calculate it is 180 degrees minus the 28.3 degrees. So again, if I bring up the calculator, oops, sorry about that, bring up the calculator and actually do that subtracting, 180 minus 28.3, we end up with 151.7. So when you're asked to find theta and they have given you a sine ratio, you have to actually calculate two angles. You have to do that. So that might be a good example to put on your help sheet as well. The last thing that we're going to look at, and I'm just actually going to mention it, the other thing that was different in grade 12 has to do with the multi-triangle shapes. And usually what happens, you see this on especially thinking type questions, but it could be application, in the sense that you have one triangle, but then you also have another one. And usually what's happening here is, say for instance, they want you to find this x. The problem is they don't give you enough information with the triangle that contains x. So it usually means, almost always, that you have to start with one of the other triangles that they've given you in the question, so that you can find something in common. And in this case, you can see what's in common here is this line. Okay, so that side is common for both triangles. So in most cases, you have to find that side in order to solve for the x that they require for you. Okay, so the best way to keep studying for this unit would be to make sure you've included the formulas on your help sheet and that you also redo the test.